Alright, this time we're going to talk about creating instances in Lightwave, and we're going to start in Howler. Basically, we've set up a landscape height map in Howler, and we've taken it into 3D Designer and also created an erosion map and a few masks that are going to be useful. Our 3D Designer outputs these things automatically. You just have to save them off to disk, and then they're yours to keep. We created a grass mat and a snow mat and a rock mat, which are going to be very useful for creating instances in these various sectors of the image. We also have a color map if we want that. Probably won't use it this time along, but it's good to have. We're going to take the OBJ object we exported from Howler, and we've already loaded it into Lightwave. And we've created some instances, and now we're going to go ahead and just show how we did that. Let's see. We loaded a weed object called for tutorial, and we also loaded this OBJ file, which is the landscape itself that was created in Howler. So I'm going to go to the object property, to the instancer tab. Make sure I'm on the right object. This is the landscape object, and I'm going to go ahead and remove this instance generator and start from scratch. Alright, so we select, under the instancer tab, we select instant generator, double click to bring it up. We add an object. In this case, we're going to use this SoCal weed object that we had loaded. This is a small piece of foliage. Set the position of that foliage to 0, 0, 0, which makes it easier to work with. And we're going to double click on that to make sure it's active, or actually single click on it. Here where it says type, instead of using pivot, we're going to use surface. We'll start with a small number, say 100, just to get our bearing. And as you can see, it's adding these instances over our object, but they're just all over the place. They're not in any one specific place. If I were to make this a much higher value, you'd see, eventually you would see that they're just not uniformly, but randomly placed on the object. Let's see, I think you have to enter that or something. There it goes. Yeah, they're not in anywhere. They're not like adhering to slope or anything like that. It's just randomly placed. So what we want to do is we want to place these objects by using these masks that we created. Here where it says weight, let's click on where it says texture. Now we can add any texture map we want, a procedural, gradient, whatever. This would be great. Say you wanted to add these trees where they only appear on areas that have no slope or whatever. You could go and make a gradient, select slope. Let's see what happens, in fact. There we go. Alright, let's bump up the value and see what happens now. Alright, so here you see we have trees on the top of the mountain, we have trees all over the landscape, but we have no trees right here where the hill is really steep. That's really steep. That's really slick, in fact. In fact, we could use the technique we used earlier, where we subtracted slope from altitude. That way you could have trees, say you wanted evergreen trees on the top and oak trees on the bottom. Evergreen trees where there's a snow line, and the oak trees down where there's nice and a lot of water down here, and you know it's nice and warm. And no trees where there's just rocks. So that's one way you could do that right there, by using the that texture value. In fact, there's probably, well, maybe you would, well, I guess you can't do a node with it that way, but you could at least do the slope. So that's one thing you could do. You could probably bake that texture into a UV map and then save out as an image and then load it into the weight map. So that's one way you could do it. But for now, we've already got some images, so let's go ahead and use those. go to procedural, no, I'm sorry, go to image map, planar, select the image we want to use. Let's try the grass map. Select Y texture axis, auto size, and there you have it. Just like I said before, you could by using howlers outputting this map that was created for this landscape. You create instances just for these this area that lies where the grass is, none on the rock, none on the snow. Another image map we had was the erosion map. Let me go back and show you this mask real quick. This is actually a map created in Howler. It depicts eroded landscape. These are all the little sluices and grooves that you have in the land created by runoff water and all that sort of stuff. So this is a very realistic trick for creating certain types of grass and weeds and stuff, because the water gets down inside those little grooves and a lot of stuff grows down in there. So it can be one way you can really improve the realism of your scenes. And some other stuff we can do here. We can of course scale these, make them minimum and maximum size. I'm going to make these a lot smaller because these are just little tiny weeds, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a random size. And another thing we want to do is go ahead and give this a preview where we can see more than just the bounding box. So I'm going to go to where the little eyeball is here and click on that and select texture shaded solid, and now we'll see a preview of that. Much more useful. I think if we bump up this value a lot more, we'll see how these are just sticking to the eroded areas on our landscape in a moment. There we go. So as you can see, there are some nice open areas, but really down in the grooves where the water runs, you can really see all these little lines of these instances. So that's a pretty cool trick for creating somewhat more realistic scenery. It gets a little slow with this many instances. So we're gonna, for now, let's drop that down a little bit. One thing you can do is the display preview. We can set it to like 10%, and there we go. That should make it a little more interactive. Yes. Alright, so that is basically an introduction to instancing and some of the ways you control instancing in Lightwave. There's a lot more you can do with instancing, of course, but for the sake of landscapes, I think that gives us a good start on it. Next up, I want to do some instancing using physics. So let's stay tuned for that. And again, thanks for watching, and talk to you later.